So, Rabbi Sai, we are on Daf Memhei Amid Aleph. We are in the middle of the Mishnah, and the last thing, the theme of the Mishnah is Shvuos Hanotlin, meaning, whereas in general the Mishnah had told us, the Torah only institutes a Shvuah so that the person taking the oath can get out of paying something that he is accused of owing. But there are certain exceptions that the rabbis made, where either we reverse the Shvuah, or we place the Shvuah on someone who is seeking to extract money from another person. And we went through several of those exceptions, and the last thing that we saw yesterday was the case of Chenveni al Pinkaso, where according to the Chachamim, if a person is assigned as a middleman, a balabas goes over to the Chenveni, to the shopkeeper or to the bank teller, and he says, pay my employee the wages that I owe him. And this instruction is done presumably in the presence of witnesses. And at the next day, the employee comes and says, I haven't been paid. And the bank says, pay us what we laid out. So the balabas now has double indemnity. In other words, he's going to be liable twice, because he's got to pay out to the bank and he's got to pay out to the employee. And in that situation, since we suspect obviously someone is not telling the truth, both of them have to take a shvuah. Ben Nanas disagreed with that, and he said, you're causing a false shvuah to be taken, because invariably one of them is going to be not telling the truth. And therefore his conclusion was that neither of them, or according to the Ran, only one of them should take a shvuah. Now, we continue from there. It's about 15 lines down. We're still in the middle of the Mishnah. Amar lechenveni tein li bediner peros v'nasan lo. So a guy goes to a shopkeeper and says, sell me a bushel of produce for a dinar. And the shopkeeper goes ahead and delivers the produce. Amar lo tein li oso dinar. And the shopkeeper then says, okay, please pay me the dinar that you owe me. Amar lo nesativ lecha unesato ba'un pali. So the balabas says, what are you talking about? I gave you the dinar and I saw you put it in your pocket. So yishba balabaya shenasan lo es dinar. So in that situation, the balabas merely has to take a shavua that he already paid the dinar, and he gets to keep the peros. The chenveni can't take the peros back. Now, this is not a shvuas hanotlin, but it's nonetheless a similar kind of situation involving a chenveni who is delivering goods. Amar lo tein li es haperos, amar lo nasatim lach v'holachtim l'soch beisecha, yishba chenveni. Now, in a situation where the situation is reversed, where let's say the balabas paid for the peros, and now he says, please deliver the produce. And the chenveni says, what are you talking about? I delivered the produce to your house, and I saw you bring the produce into your house. So, yishba chenveni. So in that situation, the chenveni can take the shvuah. Now, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, and according to Rashi, he only disagrees with the first case. And he says, Kol shahapiros biyado yado al ha'elyona, that anyone who has the produce in their possession has the advantage. Referring back to the first case, the balabas took delivery of the peros. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the balabas doesn't even have to take a shavua. It is so prima facie self-evident that the balabas has already paid. Why? Because generally speaking, as a policy, commodity providers do not sell on credit. That's at least the standard in the times of the Mishnah. Mm-hmm. And therefore, if you want to make a special arrangement to extend credit to a customer, you better make sure that it's done with witnesses or in some kind of contractual thing that you can trace the deal. Because otherwise, no one's going to believe you. Why would anyone believe that you delivered produce to someone's house without taking any money for it? And so therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the balabas doesn't even have to take a shvu in that case that he already paid. Amar l'shulchani.
And in the first case, who would it be the same standard?
In what case? The
With
Chen
the two
V'ni
parts
Alpin
of it,
Kaso?
the-
No, so it seems that Rabbi Yehuda, I don't know if Rabbi Yehuda would agree to that case or not. It could be that in that situation, maybe Rabbi Yehuda would agree. Maybe he would agree in that situation. That's a valid point. In Chen V'ni Alpin Kaso, where a guy says, "Deliver a bushel of wheat to my son," and then the Chen V'ni says, "I did it. Now pay me," and the guy says, "I already."
Paid you.
No, but you see, that's different.
Yeah.
That's not, the claim is not, "I already paid you." The claim is, the guy says, the son says, "I never got delivery of the wheat." And the Chen V'ni says, you have to pay me. So it could be that the instructions there were given in front of Edom, right? And the claim is that you never paid me. So since it was done in front of Edom, those instructions over there, the Edom can clearly testify that the Chen V'ni was extending credit. Maybe there could be that it was stipulated. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, Amr l'shulchani tein li b'dinar mos v'nasan lo. Now, if a person says to a shulchani, a bank teller, let's say, he says, "I need change for a dinar. Please give me change for a dinar, and I'll give you a dinar." So the bank teller gives him the change, and the next day, Amr lo tein li es dinar. The teller says, "Please give me the dinar that you owe." So Amr li nasativ lecha unasato bu'un pali. So the balabas says, "I gave you the dinar and I saw you put it in your pocket." So yishba balabayas. So the balabais just has to take a shavua, and he doesn't have to pay the dinar. Nasan lo esad dinar, amar lo tein li asamos, amar lo nasatim lecha v'yishlachta lesoch kisecha yishba shulchani. If the tables are turned, and if the balabas gives him a dinar and says, "Please give me change for this," and the guy then says an hour later, after the guy says, "Please give me the change for the dinar that I gave you," he says, "I already gave you the change and I saw you put it in your pocket." So yishba shulchani. The shulchani just has to take a shavua that he's telling the truth and he's off the hook. And here too, Rabbi Yehuda argues with the first case. Remember, the first case being where the teller is extending credit by giving change before he receives the dinar. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ein derech shulchani litein iser ad sheyitol dinar. And Rabbi Yehuda says that that's not normal, and therefore the balabas doesn't even have to swear, because no bank teller is going to give change out before he receives the dinar. Now, kishem sha'amru, the way that you have to translate those words is that just like we've listed shvuas hanotlin up until now, we also find other cases of shvuas hanotlin in other parts of Shas, in other kinds of situations. Hapogemes ksuvasa lo sifra ela bishvua. That in Maseches Ksuvas we learn that a woman can collect her ksuva upon termination of the marriage. But if she does something to create a defect in her claim on the ksuva, then she can still collect the ksuva, but she has to take a shvua. What's an example of that? She comes to her husband's estate and says, "Pay me the ksuva that I was already partially paid on." Or she even says to her husband who divorced her, "Pay me the ksuva, I know you paid me 25% of the ksuva already, pay me the remainder." Once she's already acknowledged that she's gotten partial payment, there's something fishy here, because the ksuva at face value entitles her to everything. So therefore, the husband can claim, "What are you talking about? I paid you the whole ksuva already, not just a portion of it." And if she wants to get the whole thing, she has to take a shvuas hanotlin. Ve'ed echad me'ida she'i perua lo sifra ela b'shavua. Furthermore, if one witness, Eid Echad, testifies that she already received her ksuva, so remember, an Eid Echad can obligate a shavua, and therefore, if she wants, she's like any other creditor, that there's witness testimony of only one witness that he was already paid, she has to take a shvua. If the real estate that was assigned to her ksuva has already been sold off, and she wants to take it from the current owners, so then she's entitled to, but she has to take a shvua. Similarly, if she wants to collect from nichse yisomin, from orphans, who don't have any first-hand information whether their father's estate was handled or not, whether the almana was paid off or not, she has to take a shavua because they have no way of challenging her. Now, furthermore, let's say the husband divorced her, husband's still alive, but he's no longer in the country because he divorced her via proxy. He's very far away on the other side of the world, and she wants to collect from his assets using his custodian, his manager of his accounts. There too she has to take a shvuah. V'chein ha-yisomim lo yifru'u ela b'shvuah. And furthermore, yisomim, the orphans of the estate, in other words, the heirs of the estate, when they want to pay off their father's debt, any creditor that comes to them, they have to. I'm sorry. When they, when they are paying off, when they collect a debt on behalf of their father. In other words, when they are collecting debts, let's say they find a promissory note in their deceased father's documents, and they want to go after the debtor. So they have to take a shavua as well. And what is the shavua that they have to take before collecting? Shavua shelo pakadnu abba v'lo amar lanu abba v'shelo matzina ben shtarosav shalav b'shtar ze parua. They have to swear the following three things: that our father never told us verbally, both before he was on his deathbed nor while he was on his deathbed, that this debt has been paid. Nor did we ever find in his documents any documentation that would state that this debt was paid. And as long as they can swear that, they can collect the debt. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka Omer afilu nolad haben lachar misas ha'av harei nishba v'notel. And Rabbi Yochanan says this is true even if the heir was born after the person's death, the decedent's death, in which case we know that he never heard any charge from his father, but he still has to swear that he can't find among his father's documents anything that would imply that the debt was paid. Amar Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, im yesh edim she'amar ha'av b'shas misasu shtar zeh eino parua hu notel shelo b'shvua. Shimon Gamliel adds that one caveat, and that is that if there are witnesses that upon the guy's deathbed he said, this debt has not been paid, please make sure you collect it, so then they don't even have to, the Yisomim do not have to take a shvuah because he's already made a public statement. Ve'elu nishboin shelo b'ta'ana. Hashutfin v'harisin v'haputrofin v'ha'isha hanosa'as v'hanosenes b'soch habayis uben habayis. Now, the following people have to take a shvuah even when there's an absence of a claim against them. Now, what does that mean? The Gemara is going to have to explain this, but at face value what it means is there are some times when suspicion may be cast upon a person because he's handling someone else's money. I don't have any specific allegation against you, but I smell something fishy, and because you manage my money constantly, I'd like you to swear. And the Mishnah therefore says that that is enough of a grounds to be able to require a person who's a money manager to take a shavua. So the following people are examples. Let's say we have two partners, and they run a business together, and one partner says, I smell something, I think someone's cooking the books.
There's no money in the bank.
Right. Or I think maybe you've been skimming off the top or something like that. Yeah. Or an aris, a sharecropper, or which is sort of like a partner. Or an apotropos, someone who's a money manager of my estate. Ha'isha hanosas v'nosas b'soch habayis. If there's a woman, presumably my wife, I can make her take a shvu if I suspect that she's mishandling my financial affairs. Yeah, well, where's she going to go? That's the attitude of the Mishnah. Uben habayis, or the son of the house. In other words, maybe my adult son is managing the affairs of the house, or maybe he's just living in the house and I'm worried that he's, going into my stuff and taking stuff. Amar lo ma'ata to'aneni, ritzoni shetishba li chayev. So therefore, even if the person who is the subject of suspicion says, what is your specific claim against me? The person can say, I don't have any specific claim. I just want you to take a shvuah that you haven't done anything fishy. So therefore, that can be grounds to be mechayev shvuah. Now, cholku ashutvin v'harisin ein yachol lahashbio. But if the partners already dissolved their partnership, let's say, two partners are unhappy, and then they decide to part ways and they divide assets, at that point it's too late to go over to your former partner and say, I smell something fishy. No, you can only do that while you're still involved in the partnership. Now, nisgalgelo shvua mimakom acher megalgelo naves hakol. But that's only if there's no pretense to make him take a shvuah for any other reason. But let's say you're litigating some other matter not having to do with your partnership, in where you can obligate your ex-partner to take a shvuah. So then you can use the koach of Gilgul shvuah and say, by the way, now that I have you in court in the chair taking a shvuah, you can also swear that you didn't skim off the top when we were partners in our business. Okay, v'hashvius mishametis es hashvuah. And finally, we know that Shemitah wipes out debts. Not only does it wipe out debts, but it also wipes out obligatory shvuas to a person. So, for example, let's say I went to a person and said, give me the $100 that you owe me, and it says, I only owe you 50. All right, now you got to take a shvuah of moda b'miktsas. All of a sudden, Shemitah arrives, wipes out the debt, it automatically wipes out his obligation to take a shvuah as well. That's the point of the Mishnah. The Gemara now says, Kol hanishboin shebetorah nishboin velo mishalmin. So let's go back to the first line of the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said that anyone who is called upon by the Torah to take a shvuah, in normal cases, that's always a situation where the person taking the shvuah is getting out of paying through his taking of the shvuah. So minolan, where do we know this from? The Omar kra velokach ba'olav velo yishalim. Misha olav l'shalim lo shavua. Because the Torah's language is, in reference to taking a shvuah, that the person shall take it, referring to the shvuah, and thereby not pay. So you see, therefore, that the person who is accused of having to pay is the one who takes the shvuah. Not the person who's trying to extract the money, but rather the person who's trying to exempt himself from paying. Ve'elu nishboin v'notlin chulei. So then the Mishnah gave us a full list of people who are the exception to that rule and take a shvuah to extract money. And the first person on that list was a sachir, a day laborer. And apparently the rabbis made a special accommodation that if I'm an employee of someone, I have a right to, I'm given sort of the benefit of the doubt that if there's a dispute as to whether I was paid or not, normally we say, hamotzi mechavero olav haraya, the burden of proof is on the extractor, but in this case we give more benefits to the employee when he says I wasn't paid, and as long as he takes a shvuah, we'll force the balabas to pay him. So the question is, Maishna sachir detakinu le'rabbanan demishtabe v'shakel. Why is an employee different from all other cases of monetary disputes? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, halachos gedolo shanu kan. So Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, a very sort of vague statement. There are great halachos that are being taught here. So halachos, honey? Halachos? Honey, hilchos aninu? Question mark. In other words, what do you mean by halachos? Normally the word halacha, when it's used by the Gemara, is halacha l'Moshe misinei, a Mosaic tradition. Are you suggesting that this is a Mosaic tradition passed down to us from Moshe Rabbeinu? So ela ema takanos gedolo shanakan. No, that's not what we mean. We never have any precedent for that. There's no historical record of that. But rather, what he meant to say was takanos gedolos. These were great rabbinic accommodations that were made. So gedolos michlal diika ketanos. What do you mean? This was a great rabbinic accommodation? Are you saying that other rabbinic accommodations are minor or are small? So Ella Amar of Nachman Amar Shmuel Takanos Kivuo Shanukan. But rather it means that this is an established accommodation. And what I believe it means is that what Shmuel is saying is that this is the ultimate propriety of the sages, recognizing that there is a need to do this because of the nature of the relationship between the employer and the employee. So in other words, what he's basically saying is, this is correct, this is ethical, this is proper. So akrua rabbanon lishvumi balabayis v'shajua asachir mishum kidei chayav. And the reason why it was done is because the rabbis were concerned about the livelihood of a working stiff, and therefore they gave him the benefit of the doubt, even though normally that would not be the case. So frak the Gemara umishum kidei chayav desachir kansinan leila balabayis. That's not fair. What, just because you want to accommodate the needs of an employee, you're going to put it on the back of the employer? Sounds like the Ontario government. In other words, the Gemara is protesting. The Gemara is saying, yeah, I understand he has rights, But an employer has rights too. Why should he be the person to get zetzed just because you want to make sure that an employee gets paid for it?
Because Shmuel looks at the next election.
Yeah, that's right. So Balabayas Gufe, but that's the whole point. It's that Chazal are incorruptible. Balabayas Gufe nichale de mishtaba sachir v'kabel kihecha di iskaron lepoalim. So here's the psychology, and this is the attitude of the initial thinking of the Gemara. An employer would be happy to have his employees have the benefit of the doubt when there's a dispute, because this will give him a good reputation, so that in the future it'll be easy for him to find employees. The inception, I'm a guy who always pays my employees. Whenever there's a dispute, we make sure that as long as he takes the shvuah, we're going to pay him.
We don't need a union shop.
We don't need the union, right? There you go. So, in other words, the assumption is that employers want this because since it's so difficult to find good work, better that I should have a good name to find good workers. So, adarabba sachir nichale de lishtaba balabayas v'nifka ki hechi deligre balabayas. So the Gemara says, I can make the exact opposite argument. An employee wants to have a good reputation, that he's not a complainer at the end of the day after a long day saying he didn't get paid. Because if he develops that bad reputation, he'll be blacklisted from the work market, and no one's going to want to hire him if a company says, we paid the guy and he complained that he never got paid. So don't you have the exact opposite argument? So therefore, why give the employee the benefit of the doubt? So balabayas al korche ogar. So the Gemara says, no, it's different. An employer needs employees in order for his company to work. And that's why he'd rather have the one with the reputation. But wait a minute, I'll turn it right around. Sachir nami al korche miskar. An employee, a worker, has to find work. In other words, this is fantastic. In other words, you should bronze this piece of Gemara anytime you read about labor disputes and union disputes and governments saying, favor the employee, minimum wage. Chazal were very equitable in the way that they looked at employers and employees. You can't give unfair advantage to either. You have to, it's a symbiotic relationship. You can't say, well, if we don't do this for the employee, we're going to destroy the economy. What are you talking about? Let the market will bear what the market will bear, because the employers need employees and employees need employers. That's the bottom line. So Ela Balabayis Torid B'Po'alavhu. So here's the real answer. The real answer is not because we want to give an advantage to employee because we favor employees, but rather because there's an assumption that when a person's running a big company, even if he's running a big farm, an agricultural company, he doesn't keep careful tabs on who he's paid and who he hasn't paid. He may have 100 laborers. So we don't expect him. But an employee only has to worry about number one. He's only got to worry about himself. So we assume that he's more mindful of whether he's been paid or not. That's the issue. So v'leisav le below shvuah. So the Gemara says, if that's the argument, then why don't we just say that the employee can collect without taking a shvuah? Answers the Gemara, kedei lahafis daitu shel balabayas. Because we need to appease the balabas, because if he really believes, I paid you already, he really believes it, we got to give him something at least, to give him peace of mind, to make him feel like he's not paying out double. V'leisav le be'idim. So the Gemara says, I have a very good solution. Why don't we have a policy that anytime you pay a laborer, you have to pay him in front of Eidim? You avoid the whole problem to begin with. So the Gemara says, Tiricha le milsa. Come on, that's not practical. It's not practical. There are many times at the end of the day when the workers are leaving from the field, I got to go get Eidim now? Where am I going to find Eidim? Maybe the guy's out in a huge faraway acre of land where he's finished his work. I got to go now look for 2 Eidim. That's going to take forever. So v'leisav le meikara. The Gemara said, let me give you another remedy. Why don't we create a policy where at the start of the day, when everyone meets in one location to get the work assignment, that's when you should pay the laborer, and that way he won't have the argument to say, I never got paid. So the Gemara answers, Shneim rotzim bahakafa. So the answer is because both the employer and the employee would rather get paid at the end. The reason is the employer says, sometimes I don't have cash at the beginning of the day. And I'd rather wait until the end of the day when I know that I have money to pay my employees. Employee will say, why do I have to walk around working, having to watch where this money is? I'd rather not have to worry about it. Pay me at the end of the day. So that's why we don't apply these other solutions.
They don't say the employer wants to see that the work gets done.
Correct. That's not one of the Gemara's answers, which you might have thought. So the Gemara now says, well, listen, if you're saying it's because we assume an employee has a greater recollection of the facts, because he's only got to worry about himself and employer's got to worry about so many other things, then we should also assume that when there's an employer-employee dispute on the amount of the wages, that we should also give the benefit to the employee, right? Let's say an employer says, I hired you for $100 a day, and the employee says, you hired me for $200 a day. Wouldn't you argue using that logic that we should give the benefit of the doubt to the employee? But that's not the case. Alama Tanya, umen omer shtaim katzatzti li v'halo omer lo katzatzti li ela echas hamotze mechaver olav haraya. That in that kind of situation, we say no, that the burden of proof lies with the employee because the employer is the muhsuk, he's the one holding the money. Why don't we say that, no, maybe the employer is distracted because he's got so many other people things to worry about. So the Gemara answers, Kitzitza vaday midkar dacherlei. The answer is because an employer, no matter how fardrate he may become from his business, he always remembers his bottom line. In other words, I know how much I budgeted for each employee because I know what my bottom line is. I know how to run my business. So there's no way I could have hired you for $200 a day. That's well outside my budget. I never would have budgeted for that. Mm-hmm. So that's why we give more credibility in this case when it comes to a dispute on the amount. Okay, so the Gemara says, Ihachi afilu avar zmanu nami. Let me ask you another question. If we give more credibility to an employee's recollection to an employer, why then do we say that the employee is only believed with the shvuah within a certain allotted time? Now, we know that there's a halacha in the Torah called bal tolin. You may not delay paying a day laborer past 12 hours after the labor is done. So if he's a day laborer, you have the entire evening to pay him until dawn. If he's a night laborer, you have the whole following day to pay him until sunset. But if the day laborer comes to you beyond that point, you still have to pay him if you haven't paid him yet. But in that situation, we don't believe the employee when he says he hasn't been paid. So the Gemara's question is, why wouldn't we believe him? Wouldn't that same argument apply that there's a certain assumption of credibility to his recollection more than the employer? Alama Tanya avar zmanu v'lo nasan lo harezo enu nishba v'noitel. Why don't we say that even if it's beyond that time, he has a right to take a shvuah and collect? But that's not the halacha. So the Gemara says, Chazaka ein balabayis oiver beval tolin. This blows me away also. There's an assumption that every balabas is from, and he's always going to pay his sachir on time. Why? Because no balabas wants to be over on the Torah's commandment of delaying wages to an employee. Now, you want to cry when you read this Gemara. You want to cry. And, and why is it? Because unfortunately, even among very, very from pious Jews, they seem to forget that there are Torah laws that apply to the way that they run their business. And
selective from kind.
It's selective from kind, unfortunately. And, it's like, religion is, Rabbi, don't mix religion and business. Right. You handle religion, I'll take care of my business, right? And it's pathetic. Yeah. But the Gemara is saying that's not the way a Frum Yid runs his life. Because there's an assumption that he's not going to violate the Torah law, we give less credibility to an employee when he says, I wasn't paid past that time. So, ve'ha'amart balabayis Torah b'po'alavu, but you just got through saying that sometimes an employer is distracted, and maybe he got distracted and didn't pay. So, hani mili mikmi delimti zman chiyuva, ki mati zman chiyuva rami anafshi yomidkar. The Gemara says, no, a frum person, no matter how distracted he's going to become, will not allow himself to violate the Torah. Whereas, yes, it's true. Sometimes I don't remember exactly all the facts because I'm running around. But if I know that the Torah is going to punish me for not doing something to my employee, I'm never going to forget that. Yeah, times have changed. That's a nice way of putting it. So the Gemara now says, V'chi sachir over mishum bal tigzol. But 1 second, there's a counter chazaka, because what you're basically saying is that you're denying credibility to the employee because you say the employer would never violate the Torah. But an employee would never violate the Torah either by asking for his wages a second time and being guilty of theft. So why don't you say that as well? So the Gemara answers, Gabi balabayis ika trei chazaki, chada dein balabayis over vival tolin, v'chada dein sachir mashas charo. He says, you're right. An employee, we assume, is a from a yid also and doesn't want to steal. But there are two chazakas on the side of the balabas. One is that he's not going to violate the isser of bal tolin. And number two, that a sachir, also an employee, is not going to delay collecting payment. In other words, why are you coming today, a day after you did the work? That in itself is suspicious. Why didn't you come immediately after the work and demand payment then? Why did you wait until now? The fact that you have no explanation for that gives more credibility to the employer, both from his own standpoint of being a from yid, and both from the standpoint is like, why did you not come until today? So therefore, there's two chazakas in favor of the balabas, only one chazak in favor of the employee, and therefore we give the benefit of the doubt to the employer in that case.
Also maybe the employee could be desperate. Desperate people do desperate things, whereas employer is not desperate.
All right. The Gemara doesn't give that as a svara. Maybe there is such a svara. I don't know. Amar of Nachman, Amar Shmuel, Lo Shanu Ela Shesachru Be'edim, Aval Sachru Shelo Be'edim, Mitoch Sheyachol Omer Lo Secharticha, Me'olam, Yachol Omer Lo Secharticha, V'nosati L'chas Charecha. So Rav Nachman quotes Shmuel as saying a huge chiddush, which makes a lot of sense when you think about it. The only time that we give more credibility to the employee when he says he wasn't paid is only if there are witnesses that he was hired in the first place. But if there are no witnesses that say he was hired, there's no independent corroboration that he was ever hired, and the only way we know that is through the admission of the employer, then the employer has a migu. He could say, I could have said, I don't know who you are, I never hired you. But the fact that I admit that I hired you gives me a migu to say, yes, I hired you, and yes, I paid you. And therefore, you will not have credibility to collect just because you take a shvuah. The only time the shvuah will work is if we have edim that I hired you, and then we give you the credibility.
If it goes back to the original part about being tarud, that the balabait is tarud, it means he's got lots of workers. Then presumably there will be lots of workers who could be edim that he was working with them in the field.
That's not necessarily
No,
presumption.
Would that be two edim though? What I'm saying is, he says when there
It could be.
edim,
The question is, would that be two edim? The basin will have to determine whether these edim are completely unbiased. I don't know. I don't know how to answer in any particular situation. At face glance, you would argue that if it's not their interest whether or not this guy gets paid or not, so then sure, of course they should be valid witnesses. But I don't know. Maybe we'd have to look at different situations.
Were they witnesses that they did the work, or were they witnesses
that he was hired? That's all we need.
They don't know he was hired.
They have to know that he was actually hired. Paul's right. If a guy just joined them on the field one day, that's not evidence that he was hired. Amar le Rabbi Yitzchak yiyasher v'chein Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yitzchak says, that's a great psak, I totally agree with it, and not only that, but Rabbi Yochanan, my Rebbe, said the same thing, that the only time the employee can take a shvuah and take is only if there are witnesses that he was hired. So wait a minute, Michlal de Pola Galei Reish Lakish, can we infer from the Yitzchak's statement that Reish Lakish, the normal disputant of Rabbi Yochanan, disagreed? So the Gemara says what we saw a few days ago also. Ika da'amri mishta havashasi le v'shasik le, v'ika da'amri mishta havashai le v'shasik le. Not necessarily, because just because Rabbi Yitzchak said that Rabbi Yochanan paskin that way doesn't mean that he saw Reish Lakish disagree with him. Because it could be, some say that Rabbi Yitzchak heard Rabbi Yochanan, and Reish Lakish was there, but he was drinking a glass of water, and so before he finished his glass of water, Rabbi Yitzchak left, not knowing whether Reish Lakish was going to disagree with Rabbi Yochanan after he finished drinking. And some say that Reish Lakish always gave Rabbi Yochanan a little bit of time to retract after making a statement, and Rabbi Yitzchak didn't wait that long to find out if Reish Lakish was going to lodge an objection. So Itmar Nami Amar of Menashia Bar Zvid Amar Rav Lo Shano Ela Shesachru Be'edim Aval Sachru Shelo Be'edim Mitoch She'echolomer Lo Secharticha Me'olam Yacholomer Lo Secharticha V'nosati L'chas Charecha. We have the same statement exactly made by these other Amoraim, that there have to be witnesses that the guy was hired in the first place. Amar Rami Bar Chama kama ma'alya hashmaita. So Rami Bar Chama says how fantastic this teaching is. In other words, it's so good that it's so proper that this teaching is this teaching. So Amalei Rava, my Ma'al Yusa. So Rava says, you may think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but I got a problem with it. You know why? Because in Cain, Shavuas Shomrim Dechi of Rachmana Heichim Yishkachasla Mitoch Sheyachol Omer Lo Lo Hayu Dvar Me'olam Yachol Omer Lo Nensu. He says, according to Shmuel's Psak, that if there are no witnesses, the guy was hired, he can't take a Shavua, then you can apply that to other cases as well. And you're going to have a problem. The Torah says that if a guy's a shomer, let's say he's a shomer sacher on an object, and he claims that it was that an oinus happened to it. It's just the animal dropped dead, and I had nothing to do with it. So the halacha is that the shomer sacher can take a shvu and exempt himself. But
it's weird that he never got it.
You need witnesses of the original.
Well, so no, he can swear. Al Shvuru Mesa, he says it just the animal, the oinus happened to the animal. The question that I have is, he says, why does the Shomer Sacher have to, he says, Mitoch sheyachol omer lo lo hayu dvar me'olam, yachol omer lo nensu. He says, why does the Shomer ever have to take a Shvua? Why should the Shomer have to take a Shvua? Let him say that he has a migu. According to what you're arguing, I have a migu. I have more credibility because I could have said, I don't know who you are, I don't know what you're talking about. Why don't we give him the credibility to say that an oin has happened and let him get out of it even without taking a shvuah? In other words, according to that argument of Shmuel, that if there were no witnesses, and say the same thing by a shomer. So the Gemara answers, Da'af gidlei be'edim. So the Gemara says, no, because we're talking, you're right. The only time that a shomer has to take a shvuah like that is if there are witnesses that he was given the object for safekeeping. And now the Balabas says, I have witnesses that I gave it to you, now give it back to me. That's where he can take a shvuah and exempt. That's the only time the Torah requires him to take a shvuah. But mitoch sheyachol omer lo hechzartiv lach, yachol omer lo nensu. But wait a minute, he still has a migu. Should not have to take a shvuah. That's where you were referring to, Mark. He can say, I gave it back to you, even if you have witnesses that you gave it to me. But I can always argue that I returned it to you. So da'af gidlei bishtara. So the Gemara says, you're right. If that was his claim, he wouldn't have to take a shvuah. But the reason why the Torah requires him to take a shvuah is, let's say there was a shtar involved. In other words, like when you drop off a garment at the dry cleaners, they're supposed to give you a ticket, right? So that you have evidence that the guy has your object, so that when you come to him to collect it, he can't say, I don't know what you're talking about, or I gave it back to you already. If he gave it back to me, why am I still holding the ticket? So, which is interesting because
That's what you signed.
which is why you sign the ticket or whatever it is, right? When you don't have the ticket,
No
they'll
ticket, no laundry.
they'll no tiki, no shirty. Right? The afkid lebishtar. So the Gemara now says michlal de teravayo sviralu hamafkid etzel chaver beedim ein tzarich lahachzer lo beedim, but bishtar tzarich lahachzer lo beedim. You can infer from this whole discussion that up until now everyone seems to agree that if you give something an object with edim, it does not have to be returned with edim. If a guy is a nifkad, he's a shomer on an object that was given to him with edim, he does have the right to claim, I gave it back to you, even without witnesses. And that's a valid claim. That seems to be the cadence of the Gemara that we just saw. But if someone gives you something with a shtar, where he demands to have a ticket to show that he gave something to you, then when you give it back to him, you better be sure that there's evidence, either witnesses or the return of the ticket, before you give it back to him. Now, Kari Rami Bar Chama later of Sheishes Vayasim David es Advarim Ha'ila Belibo. Now, Rami Bar Chama is still maintaining Shmuel's position that the only time that this employee is believed to be able to extract his wages with a shvuah is when there are witnesses that he was hired. But Rami Bar Chama is now praising Rav Sheshes because Rav Sheshes wanted to verify that Shmuel was consistent in this shita. And therefore he pronounces a pasuk about Rav Sheshes that King David placed these things on his heart and was very conscientious. And that's exactly what Rav Sheshes is like. He's very conscientious and wanted to verify that this is how Shmuel consistently paskined halacha. The Ashkechei Rav Sheshes l'Rabba bar Shmuel, Amar lei Tani Marmidi b'Sachir. because once Rav Sheshis encountered Shmuel's son, who was a Talmud of Shmuel, and he wanted to know, did your Rebbe ever teach you anything about the laws of a laborer, an employee? Amar lei in Tanina Sachir Bizmanu Nishba V'Noitel. That yes, he taught us that a Sachir, as long as he's claiming the wages in the proper window of time, he can take a Shavua if there's a dispute, and he can take the wages. So Keitzad Bizman, Sha'amar lo sechartani v'lo nasata li schari. So what's an illustration? Where the employee says, you hired me, but you haven't paid me yet. V'halo omer secharticha v'nosati la scharecha. And the employer says, what are you talking about? You're right, I hired you, but I paid you already. Aval omer lo shtaim katzatzta li v'halo omer lo katzatzi l'chayla echas hamotzim echavero olav haraya. But if the employee says, you hired me for 200, and the employer says, I only hired you for 100, there's a dispute on the amount. Like we said before, we assume that an employer keeps tabs on his budget, and therefore the burden of proof is on the employee. Now the Gemara now says, wait a minute, I have a question. And this is really what Rav Sheshis was trying to verify from Shmuel's son. Reisha below raya. If the second case, where there's a dispute on the amount, requires witnesses, it must mean that the first case does not require witnesses. And we still believe the employee, even in the absence of witnesses, that he was hired, and he's able to extract with a shvuah. So this is a kasha on Shmuel, because Shmuel's not being consistent. Shmuel previously said the only time that an employee can extract with a shvuah is if there are witnesses that he was hired. But here it's mashma that even without witnesses he can do that. So Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, no. Reisha v'seifa biraya. Raya de l'shalem katani, raya de shvuah lo katani. So the Gemara answers no. In the Reisha also, Shmuel holds that there have to be witnesses that the guy was hired. But this teaching, or this brisa that Shmuel cited, he'll explain it like this. That the first part, which said that the employee can take a shvuah, is yes, where there were witnesses also that he was hired. But it's not talking about witnesses in order to entitle him to take a shvuah. That's not something that the brisa felt was necessary to list. But when the brisa was talking about what is necessary to actually extract additional cash from the employer, that's where the brisa said you have to bring proof that in order to be able to get the cash based on a claim, you have to bring proof that the claim is true. But if the award to the claim is not that we're going to just give it to you because of your claim, but you have to take a shvuah on top of that, that the brisa didn't feel it necessary to add that additional information. By the way, there has to be testimony that you were hired in the first place, but that's implicit in the brisa, and therefore Shmuel is defending his position. Okay, we'll hold it here for today. Have a wonderful, a good Erev Shabbos.